I was talking to one of the activists from the Puerto Rican community, which is very successful at activism. And she's not Muslim. And one of the things that was being put to the fore is this. You can have whatever, and I personally don't care what anyone has to say, because I don't speak for following or what people have to say. You know, the issue becomes this. You have to ask yourself, does human life has value? Does human life have value? If human life has value, then are you saying that, you know, are you saying if a person doesn't do something to justify the taking of life, that are you saying that if a person, you know, didn't do something to justify the taking of their life, that it's an open field, like, you know, their life can be taken? And this is something that I have posed to some of the Muslims. You know, are you telling me that a youth that's struggling, and I'll be straight up with you, this is not a defense of sexual activity. I quote me properly. This is not a defense of sexual activity, because Islam defines what is legitimate sexual activity and what's not legitimate. It's not my ijtihad, it's not your ijtihad. Islam defines it. Islam defines a certain context. But are you telling me that if a youth is struggling with transsexuality or whatever, then their life is open game? Like, for instance, the 5 younger people that were killed in the Puerto Rican community, some of them were killed in very, you know, horrible ways. You're telling me that it's justifiable Islamically? You're telling me that religion promotes just the taking out of people? Get the heck out of here with that type of mentality. And I have to speak in that way, you know, to take the people that really don't want to listen, and they want to be in formality, and, you know, the Imam shouldn't speak like this. Well, leave out of the discussion. But we as a religious community, if we're promoting that because of a person's sin or their sexual orientation or this or that, well, we don't even see it. We're just seeing femininity or this and that. We're saying that those people's lives can be taken. So the issue becomes the dilemmas for the government now. The government has to decide what protections are they going to give that group of people. We may not like it, but the same thing happened when white racist nationalists didn't want to give blacks their dignity before the law. And they felt as though they can walk around the country with a rope and just tie up anybody at will and kill them. The law had to intervene and say, it's not allowable to take a person's life in this way. You may not like their skin color. You may not like how they act. You may not like how they dance, how they look, but that's your personal prejudice. But once you go into the public sphere and you try to take that person's life, then the law intervenes. That's where it's at. We're not in an Islamic state, people. Get that out of your head. We're not in a Muslim majority country. You're in a bottom line issue. You're at a bottom line issue. You safeguard life regardless of whether you agree with the person or not. Me, myself, when it comes to free speech, I may not like the racist white nationalists. And I may think that certain forms of the racist white nationalist speech are a detriment to society. But I'm not going to promote immediately this. You just take away the person's right to express themselves. Because once you begin to do that, you allow for the state to take away your right to be able to declare your position on issues. And that's the dilemma that we're in. You know, that catch-22 didn't go away. The Muslims didn't build a world for us to live in. That's the reality of the situation. Most of us that are here that are Muslim are in this place because there is no Muslim country to go to that will establish justice. That's the reality at the end of the day. You know, Hassan is saying, and I think the majority of Muslims would agree that life is sacred regardless. There are a minority that will say other, but that's not the reality. That's not the reality. You know, we're in a dilemma where even from the angle of a person being suicidal, forget about a person actually engaging in a certain type of sexual act, which is considered haram in Islam. But we're at the point where if a person identifies with the LGBT community in terms of their sexual orientation, and they're suffering from suicide or this or that, or suicidal tendencies, the Muslim community has no way to deal with that. The Muslim community has no response to that. The only thing that they're focused on and fixating is the issue of that person is LGBT. And to be honest with you, I remove the LGBT thing and I put in there, we look at each other from the angle, that person is Indian. That person is Hispanic. That person is black. And I know that because I've been dealt with like that in that way. That's not a justification of something that's haram. How do the Muslims get from this to that? I don't understand that. It's just the issue of treating people with a basic dignity. Your task at that time of Muslim is, how are you going to guide that person and support them to uplift themselves, their iman, their condition, to be in a better state? Not only that person, but the person that's on crack, the person that's stuck on heroin, the person that's on meth, the person that has a mental health condition that's not being dealt with. Anyone, who is in a vulnerable state or is in a struggling state, the methodology of prophethood is to guide that person. But if you're just in a situation in which you're in the mentality where we disagree, I knock you off, like you see in the Muslim world, you're never going to come to that point of being able to deal with that situation, right? Whoever decides to be in the Muslim land, that's free. Islam allows for that. We live in a time period where it's like, make your move, at the end of the day. But those things become ideal unless a person has tried them. I lived in the Muslim world. I lived in Egypt. I know what it's like for my daughter to have gone into the hospital and had almost died in the hospital because their healthcare system is below human grade. I was next to a bed which an Egyptian couple had their son in, and their son was dying. I was in the room that was next to another room in which there was Muslim mothers that had blood on the wall because their children died on the spot. So when people bring me that type of thing, I'm like, I'm for being in the best situation that you can be in. But there's a human dignity issue. I was also stopped by the army and military because I had a beard. Just like the same with the sister with the niqab who got stopped because there was some sort of terrorist activity that took place. The religious person in appearance was the one that got attacked on that issue. And you could disappear to the point where people are saying, oh, mashallah, ya sheikh, ya mashallah, because they know you can disappear. I've rode by places where the mashaykh will sit with me and they say, you see that place right there? That's where they take brothers and they torture them at. So if we're going to talk about reality, let's talk about reality. We're at a bottom line issue when it comes to defending human life and human dignity at the bottom line. If you can't defend human life and human dignity, then you're not going to have any practice of the deen. Because you can't practice the deen in a proper way if you're allowing oppression to take place between people. Islam denies our right to oppress one another, and it commands us not to oppress each other, right? Islam necessitates capital punishment under a court system with a legitimate ruler and a due process. It's not just an open game. It's not just the average person decides what they want to decide. That needs a legal system. It needs a process to be in place. It needs an investigation and so on and so forth. So that has nothing to do with the society that we live in, because we don't live in a society in which you're applying capital punishment as is understood in some Islamic teachings, right? Because again, that regards a court of law. So it's a living dynamic process. It's not you just find something in a book and you apply it. Doesn't work like that. You understand what I'm saying? Or else you just get chaos with the system or imbalances. Just like you have problems in capital punishment in this society, you have problems with capital punishment in Saudi. It's the non-Egyptian, non-Saudis that end up getting under the capital punishment. And then those who have connections with the princes and this and that, they're the ones that escape. But we know they're the ones in the UK doing all kind of foul stuff, and they're over here doing this and doing that. So, leave that point aside. We don't live in that type of society. We live in a society where there is an agreement between the government and the people, right? And that's that's the reality at the end of the day. But it's not even the issue of HUD. It's more deep than that. It's more deep than that. You know, the problem is that you have issues that are not being dealt with. You know, you have homosexuality being practiced in the Muslim world. You know, if you do a Google search, and if you do a Google search, do a stats review, and look at the type of porn that's looked at in Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and all those places. It's gay porn. Those studies have been done. We talk with knowledge. We talk with knowledge and understanding. We don't talk just based upon what we think and this and that without any insight or regard. In Pakistan, they have transgender people. Is known. Ask Pakistanis about the transgender people, the guys that dress like that. So you have a problem where you have a portion of the population that even in the Muslim world, they don't know how to deal with them, right? The only advantage that's there in the Muslim world is that you have privilege given to the traditional family structure for as long as that lasts. And so that is where the difference is, that the Muslims the religious in the West have lost that battle. There's no privilege to the traditional family structure. And matter of fact, a big part of the problem is that this is rooted in individualism in this society. So even the traditional family structure is collapsed. Look, marriage in the Muslim community is endangered. The amount of divorce and the amount of, you know, breakdown and domestic violence that's there, you know, we can no longer say we're different than others. So we understand the scare, we understand the concern, but I'm not interested in polemics. I'm interested in just, you know, we have to clarify some basic fundamental things. Like, what are we saying about human life? And that's part of the problem. And so people that are coming from those type of societies, they're not going to be able to help us deal with these challenges, right? And that's the issue that we have to say at the end of the day. If their opinions are not opinions that come close, like at least Sheikh Uthaymeen came close, and there's some humility in that. And they say, well, in that society, they operate like this on that basis. But for the most part, you see as a whole in those societies, they don't have any right, you know, to speak. You know how many scholars disappeared? Y'all didn't say anything. Forget about what you're seeing now. How many scholars got locked up in recent times and were in prison, and capital punishment was waged on them, and you didn't say anything? Leaders in the community, Imams, Mashaykh, some people justified it, predicated upon their sectarian tendency. We don't live in that type of society at the end of the day. You know what I'm saying? We just don't live in that type of society. We live in a society in which what we're operating from is just basic mutual respect to live and let live. You go make your money, make my money. You have your private way, I have my private way. Let's just not destroy society in the public sphere. And we're battling it out with each other. And so there's issues that people, you know, you got to deal with what's going on in the 21st century. And you have to deal with the reality of how do you navigate as a Muslim. Don't quote me if you're going to misquote me, right? It's just the fact that I don't think that we're bringing solutions to the table just by the way that we do it with the Salafi Sufi dialogue. We just write each other off and we takfir each other. Or the way that someone that comes in and they say, well, I believe that you can vote or you can participate in the political system. You have some of the takfiri groups will come and say, you're a kafir because you don't believe in the Sharia. So that type of approach is not going to work in this context. That's why I say the mentality of the Muslims is not a mentality which is viable for our growth, our empowerment, our development. You know, and people are busy talking about don't engage social justice, focus on yourself and your self-purification. But then when we talk and we say, where's your sex education for the Muslim youth? Where's your social services for the people that were molested? And I mentioned this multiple times because recently I've been accused. People say, well, you support this and you don't, you know, you're supporting this group and that type of approach. And I'm like, you don't even know what I support. I was trained as a social worker that had to deal with everyone. That's the reality at the end of the day. And being trained as a social worker, having to deal with anyone, You know what I'm saying? Then that means that you have to figure out how you're going to deal with them. And there's a bottom line when it comes to that type of work: safety. The issue of safety. That's it. You go into a house and you see a woman, and you see that she's taking care of her house in such a way that the house is untidy. She has stuff thrown all over the floor. I myself may come in and start throwing up. Like, what the heck is this? You're trained. No, that's not the goal. You're not there to look at the fact of how clean the sister is. You're there to look at the fact of how safe does she keep her children. Bottom line stuff. Bottom line stuff. You go to another house. The person has statues and they have offerings to the statues. You go in there and you ask and you investigate, is this safe or not? Your job is not to go in there and deal with the issue of whether that person is worshiping a statue or not worshiping a statue. Your job, your task in that situation is to go make sure there's safety. You find a family, and that family, the grandmother is addicted to heroin or using marijuana. The issue becomes, can that person maintain the household or not maintain the household? Are they a controlled drug user or not a controlled drug user? Because if you come in judgmental in that type of capacity that you have the power of the state, and that's why they had to limit social workers. That means you're going to be pulling everybody's kids out of their homes, and then you're not going to have anywhere to put them in based upon your judgment, based upon what you feel, based upon your sentiment. When that's not what you're tasked with. You're tasked with the issue of that person's life. Is it safe or not safe? Right? That's a bottom line. And so with that type of mentality, that's the same thing that I say when we're dealing with the homosexual community. Nobody, look, y'all not bringing anything new to the table. We know what the ruling is on Islam. You're not adding anything new to the table. You know what I'm saying? You didn't do anything for legislation 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago. You didn't fight for the preservation of the traditional family. You understand what I'm saying? So the bottom line becomes, as an imam, you have to look at the fact, okay, what kind of services can I bring to this person? How can I elevate their iman? How can I support them if they've been sexually abused? How can we support them if they're struggling with their sexuality? We know what the ruling is. Don't get it messed up. Let me say it to you again. We know what the ruling is. We don't need you to constantly tell us what the ruling is. We know what haram is. But we're not talking about understanding what haram is. We're not talking about justifying someone's particular behavior. We're talking about how are you going to service that person in need? And that's what y'all haven't figured out, because you're caught up in somebody setting an agenda for you and not understanding how to deal with the situation. And I mentioned the example before, and I mention it again. Until you get the phone call where the sister is suicidal and she's telling you, I don't want to go to the LGBT community. I don't feel comfortable with my family, and I don't feel comfortable with the Muslim community. Is Allah punishing me? Until you're ready to deal with that type of reality, not some hypothetical reality, not what some freak show stuff that's going on in the bedroom, not what you see some people that, they're walking down the street and they're dressed in a certain way because they're a small percentage. But until you're ready to deal with that Muslim that's struggling, that's telling you I'm struggling, is crying to you, is questioning where they stand at with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, is telling you they're suicidal, I don't have anywhere to turn, Imam, can you help me? Allah is the witness to that. This is not a made-up scenario. And I mentioned that before. I mentioned the case before. And because some people, I listen to them and the type of stuff that they bring to the table. It's not that I want to go back and forth, because I don't. I'm more concerned of how are we servicing humanity. And I told you the case, and from the Puerto Rican community, non-Muslim, the two sisters that were molested by their relative, and the types of decisions that we had to make in the mental health organization that I had worked in at that time. First of all, her mom was in a bind because she didn't want to approach the family that had committed the act of basically raping her daughter, because it would destroy her grandmother. So she was put in a situation which was problematic. And her husband wanted to kill the dude. So it's not that they were passive. They were trying to figure out how you work all that stuff out and trying to maintain some sort of control in the family. So she goes to get help for her daughter sometime after. By that time, her daughter, one of the two that got molested, became a lesbian. Suicidal tendencies, clinically depressed, and she was in a relationship. She was in a relationship with another young girl, and she was dumped, so her depressive tendencies became even more problematic. She was raped. She's suicidal. She was in a relationship, got dumped, and then at school she's being bullied. 4 or 5 girls. So her sister is like Puerto Rican fiery, like, yo, I'm gonna go toe to toe for my sister. Nobody's gonna harm my sister. And it's very clear that at school she doesn't fit in. What solution do you have for that? Do you give, what solution do you have for that? Do you give we're not, but Abu Dawood, we're not pushing our values. We want to talk about values as a Muslim community. We don't even have a regard for blacks in the Muslim community. We don't have even a regard for women in the Muslim community. We have Muslim sisters that are being used for green cards by their own family members within each tribal community. It's not just from one community to the other. If you want to push your values, build a Muslim community that's shiny and gleaming and is ready to get down, busy, and do work. That's the reality at the end of the day. The rhetoric is not working now. If it is that we're going to push our values, let's push them like Nujassid al-Qiyam al-Islamiyya. Let's embody those values. Let's embody those values. But when we have Muslims saying that, poor people, they're poor because it's their fault because of moral failings. You know what I'm saying? Their own moral failings. That's what we have, even among some of the black leadership. That's how they're dealing with the black community. That's not acceptable. That's something to be rejected. When you start blaming someone's situation totally on them, it's different than encouraging them to take responsibility and building supports for them. You understand what I'm saying? But when you start justifying people's oppression by blaming themselves, so I'm saying that we as a Muslim community, we talk about pushing our values only when it comes to the LGBT situation because we're scared as hell. We don't know how to deal with it. That's whack. That's whack. I'm not running with that. And I don't care about platform or anything like that. I'm not running with that. You understand what I'm saying? If we really want to push our values, where's ta'awun al-birri wa taqwa wa la ta'awun al-ithmi wal-udwan? We have on the internet brothers going back and forth making takfir of each other. Where's the values of Islam there? So if we're going to be on a complete mission to push our values, which I agree with you, then where is it in stabilizing the Muslim marriage? Right? We can't just come out and talk only on this one issue and just keep hitting it like it's the only concern. It's an issue. But again, if we're going to push our values, why aren't we teaching Muslim youth how to go into healthy Muslim families and practice healthy sexuality? When I hear a Muslim youth go off on his spouse and the spouse tells me, he told me, I don't know why I'm here with you, B. I should be out there effing, these hoes or whatever, that type of, this is within the context of a Muslim family. You're telling me about pushing our values. I'm looking and I'm like wondering where are the values at? This is in the context of a Muslim family. A young Muslim man is telling a young Muslim woman that, and it's going to end up to be a young couple divorced with young children not having a mother and a father because that's the way. So we have to wake up. We have to wake up. I know of a case where the husband is extremely abusive and the children are suicidal. And we're talking about pushing our values. How we push our values if we build a strong Muslim community and we educate our youth not to be so scared about dealing with others, but how to be strong with themselves and how to establish Islam within themselves and with each other. And isn't that what the conservatives are saying? But they don't want to push that in the community. They want to push just focus on your own spirituality. Okay, so where are the well-funded masajid? You know what I'm saying? And I said this before. I personally I'm not feeling the talk. If you want to support the black Muslim community, like everyone is saying, you know what I'm saying? Where's the economic base? Where's the sadaqah and the zakat that's going into those communities from the general Muslim community? After all, they're on the front lines. There was some Muslim brothers from the Salafi Dawah. They were in Kensington in North Philadelphia. That's heroin central. Where's the $1 million now for a drug rehab center that the Muslims are running? At least Imam in Chicago is in the middle of the hood. You go to Imam's activities and you may hear AR-15 or AK-47 or 9mm pop off, but they're known in the community for servicing the community. They're known in the community for giving medical services. They're known in the community for giving food. They're known in the community for re-entry. So I have love for the brothers. That's what the Black Panther Party was doing. That's what the Young Lords were doing. But and that's a form of social justice. Brother Rami and them, Dr. Rami and them, they were going after the Muslim store owners. And by the way, the brother's Palestinian. They were going against the Muslim store owners that were contributing to food deserts in the hood or selling alcohol and so on and so forth. He went on national public radio and put his reputation on the line for donations from the Muslim community and called out his own people. So where are the Muslim organizations like that? And that's the only thing I tell the brothers, like, give us a program. I understand your point, but it's like you have me here debating. It's a shame. Yeah, it's a shame that you have a group that you disagree with, the LGBT community. They're protecting black life and you're not doing diddly squat. And you can't tell me they're not. I've been in the rallies and I've seen the situation and I've seen the pushes. Sure, there's an agenda. Anybody with common sense on the face of the earth is going to have an agenda on where they stand in the dunya, except the Muslim community. They're busy talking about the conspiracy of this group and the conspiracy of that group. We know that everyone is vying for their interests. There was an Egyptian politician that told some of the young students of knowledge, this is all about interests. Y'all better get up with the game. Each group is vying for its power position. But where are the Muslims at? That's the only question that I have. Where are the Muslims at? And so if we're going to be taking our cue from people overseas, that they themselves at this point, they can't get it together, we're in bad shape. We have to build from within. And we have enough ability to build from within. But if we're not going to sit down and use Islam as a basis in which we come and we talk to each other, we're not going to be able to make any moves. And that's part of the problem, that we're talking over each other. We're talking behind each other. We're talking at each other, but we never want to be open to each other. That's where we need a little bit of liberalism with each other. You know what I'm saying? That would be good if we had a little bit of liberalism with each other, a little bit of acceptance and tolerance with each other. Not that I go in the masjid, I barely don't get any salams. The other brothers takfiring me. The other brothers calling me a mubtadi. The other brother has issues with me because of my cultural background. And so what are we talking about? What are we talking about in that regard? So we're not going to be able, look, brothers are asking overseas about people to deal with ethnic issues, about dealing with racism. How are they going to help you in dealing with racism? Explain that one to me. That's why I said we can't take our cues from places where they themselves don't even understand the application of Islamic teaching on issues. They themselves don't understand the issue of how do you deal with these problems. And until the Muslim community comes into that awakeness, we're not going to go anywhere. How do we push our values? By just talking about them only? That type of da'wah doesn't work. The Jehovah's Witnesses go and they do that. The Protestants, they go and they do that. It was said that if you want your Muslim values to operate, build people a model so they can see what's going on with you. But if your community is in shambles, everybody wants to do da'wah. Where are we going to send the new converts to? The European converts, the European Americans, the African Americans, Asian Americans, the Latinos. Where are we going to send them to? To a place in which they're not welcome? To a masjid in which they're not welcome? We ourselves don't feel welcome in these communities. And so if we ourselves don't feel welcome in these communities, and sometimes it's even our own people we don't feel welcome, how are we dealing with the new Muslims? So I don't want to go on a rant. The issue is that we cannot ask other people outside of our community for help. It's not going to work. We have to focus on our own development. And we have to focus on servicing our community. That's why I said put the human being and servicing the human being properly. You're going to discriminate against someone and servicing them because of where they're coming from and their attitude, rather than taking that as an opportunity to bring Islamic teaching. And that's the issue at the end of the day. You know, I'll be straight up with you that there are some communities that do good work. You know what I'm saying? There are some communities that do good work. There's some communities that have a good recipe. But on some fronts, you know, they work, and some fronts they don't. I'll be straight up with you. We have a problem with the poor. We have a problem in dealing with the poor in the Muslim community. You got to realize that Islam in America has become suburbanized. And so you know, a lot of the issues that we deal with have nothing to do with where large portions of the Muslim community are at, because you have a lot of Muslims that are just well-to-do. MashaAllah, alhamdulillah. You know, they just don't live in those realities. Right. No. That's not how we correct stuff. We correct stuff by identifying the social problem, and then we go from there. If we want a community of understanding of what's right, you know, then we understand the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? We understand the example of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the only one that can be there, right? We can talk about the communities that are working. I mentioned that. I mentioned Imam and the type of job that they do here in the Chicagoland area. I mentioned the type of work that they do, how constructive it is, right? How productive that is. I'm going local. You know what I'm saying? There were communities that were doing excellent jobs on other levels. You know what I'm saying? But those communities come in and they come in and they come out. They fade in and they fade out. You know what I'm saying? It's not always consistent. You know, and because of the internal politics in some of these communities, they collapse their own work. You know, so we have to, you know, be there. But I'm willing to talk about what a good, healthy community looks like. You know what I'm saying? I'm willing for all of us, and you know, I don't have to be the one that has all the answers here. We can all say, well, I think this is a healthy community. I think this masjid over here is getting this right. I think this imam has this right. You know, it's like it's an open dialogue. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, but here, you know, the issue is removing that frame of mind and becoming solution oriented. That's what this live is about. It's saying that there's a bottom line. You have to respect human dignity and human life, or else you don't have anywhere to go. That was the issues. That's another issue, that the da'wah is focusing on the upper class so that it can be maintained, and the poor, but I'll be honest with you. I got off of a conference call with an imam today for about an hour. And he's actually not from the Latino community, not from the African American community, not from the European American community. And his concern was working in the inner city. You know, so there's people that are concerned with that. It's just that not enough people are concerned with that. And it's not only the inner city, it's also rural areas. You know what I'm saying? It's also reservations. If we want to be really, you know, demographically sound, and if we want to be like we're really in charge of da'wah, like real solid activity, you know, there's a lot of areas. And right now, look, half of America is unemployed. So we're all poor, you know, in that regard. And so, but yes, we don't take care of the poor. We don't uplift them. But at the same time, there's nothing wrong with people having money. It's just they have to have a sense of priorities, you know, in how it is that they're maneuvering. The masajid that were, you know what, let's highlight a certain point. There's 2 points here. Hassan is raising a point and Abu Dawood is raising a point. In the African American community historically, there was the masajid that were created from the ground up by imams and so on and so forth. We lost that model because the models of the masajid went from the storefront or the house or the small corner to multi-million-dollar structures, you know, or $500,000 structures. And so that changed the dynamic. It changed even the internal organization. You know, that's the issue that comes up. Yes, there is a canvassing already that's done. I'm waiting for the study to come out. Dr. Hassan Bagby, who's part of MANA, he was supposed to release the 2020 study. I think the last study that he did was like 10 years back. And he started to canvass the types of political structures in the masajid and what kind of services they were offering. And so I have to ask him again why he didn't release it, but it was supposed to be released 2020. And he did some statistical analyses. And so one of the things that was the case before is many masajid did not have imams. You know, but you have to add on to that type of studies, like what kind of services are there for the people, what kind of communities are there, how women friendly is it, how children friendly is it, how friendly is it to non-Muslims in terms of, you know, servicing and doing work with these communities. So there's some communities that, you know, they're okay on some fronts. You know, somebody may say, I don't like the community, but, you know, you can grade them and say overall they're okay. But you have to realize that also those communities are not necessarily always geared towards certain cultures. You know, so on those fronts, they're not always like multicultural communities. There's a few communities across the states which are very cultural, and they manage to do that really well. And there's other communities which they manage to do social services really well. There's other communities they manage to do youth work very well. You know what I'm saying? And it's like that. It's like we don't, you know, we have to map that out, you know, of what that looks like. That's why we can have these conversations, because we see that work and we can say this shouldn't be the case, that should be the case. But we can't even get to that point if we're not regarding the human being. You know what I'm saying? That's part of the issue here. You know, how are you giving dawah to people? You know, Imam Wesley, Abu Sumayya, you know, a sister called him up and was like, yo, I want to take Shahada. There's only one catch here. She's lesbian. Can I become Muslim? You know what I'm saying? And so what do? Do you say no? Let me ask you a question. You know, do you say no? I want to see what you have to say. Hamza, si una señora te llama, no es musulmana, y te pregunta a cogerle shahada, pero ella te dice que es lesbiana, ¿qué tú le dices? ¿Qué tú le dices? Que no puede entrar el Islam. If someone tells you that they're on heroin and they say they want to take their shahada, what do you tell them? No, they can't take their shahada, people. Nobody's bold enough to answer the question. You know what I'm saying? What do you tell them? But these are things that have to come up. Yeah. Let them work that out with Allah wa ta'ala. Now the struggle that you're going to have is that where do they go? Where do they go? How do you service them? That's the issue. You know, that's the issue. So we're not at that. We're at the point where we're not clear on that issue. That if you tell the person become Muslim, what did they go? Where did they go? And where do they get services? I have that dilemma with the converts. Once they become a convert, where do they go? You know, who's going to service them properly? And that's the issue. That's the bottom line. It's like, are we talking about communicating the deen, or are we talking about just focusing on people's haram behavior or what's prohibited? I would like to know. People should correct me in the da'wah. Correct me in the da'wah. I can learn. I thought that we were just trying to communicate the deen, let people work out their situations. You know what I'm saying? And we haven't worked out at that level. Like, what do you do if you have people coming into Islam and that's their orientation? Are you telling them that they can't be Muslim? You know, it's just like, are we telling them like the same thing that the man told the guy, the murderer who killed 99 men? No, you can't. There's no tawbah for you. There's no tawbah for you. Are we saying the same thing? We're not ready for these challenges. You know what I'm saying? We barely are ready for the challenge of, you know, the dude with tats all over his face and all over his neck. And he takes shahada and he comes to the masjid and everybody's like, call the cops. That happened here in Chicago. You know what I'm saying? They suspected the guy, they called the cops on him. So the guy comes in with tats all over his face. We're not ready for that. We're not ready for if the sister can be in the musalla area. In some communities, the sister can't be in the musalla area. So I don't have the answers to deal with people's hang-ups on certain things. But we just need to know the bottom line, of what are we trying to achieve. Are we trying to achieve communicating the deen? And then if we're communicating the deen, do we have the services? Right? Do we have the ability to address these people's situations? It doesn't mean that we're accepting the haram and the halal. And then we have to be humble too. We have to look at ourselves as well. Right? And I can agree with the conservative camp on this. Look at yourself. Purification of yourself. Okay, where do you stand in your relationship with Allah? So if you see you're struggling in your relationship with Allah, why do you think other people are not struggling in their relationship with Allah or life? Why don't you give them the same courtesy? I don't understand that issue. You know what I'm saying? So I'm closing out on that note. But I will say we have to solve our own problems. We have to get busy. Stop depending on people to tell you what to do from other countries that they themselves don't know what to do. You know what I'm saying? We have real challenges on the ground here. If we were to focus on our community, we could be the most excellent community on the face of the earth. We have the potential. We have the resources. We have the diversity. We have the intelligence. We have the capacity. But we don't want that. And so you have to want it. And you have to envision it. You understand what I'm saying? You have the ability to bring solutions to the society almost. But you have to want that. You have to be uncomfortable. Take yourself out of the comfort zone and realize what the situation is. You know what I'm saying? Where do you stand in the world? If you hide yourself, Islam didn't spread in the African American community because people were just hiding. People went out there and they walked in the street, and there were people that were on drugs. There were people that were prostituted, and they started directly talking to the people. You know what I'm saying? And so I don't know. We've lost that. We've lost that sense of having hope in people. We do that with our youth. Our youth fail on some things, and immediately, there's no space for them anymore. Yeah, adults, the same thing. They fail. There's no space for them. But Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.